Welcome to the latest SeahawksDraftBlog.com live stream. Rob Staton here, solo mission. What we're going to do today is we're going to do a bit of a Q&A. So if you've got a question about whether it's the 2022 draft, whether it's the Seahawks draft class specifically, if you want to look ahead to the 2023 draft class, if you want to talk about what's next, then drop in a question. Super chats are encouraged. If you want to support the channel, then drop in a super chat. I'm led to believe that the Seahawks are watching, and for every super chat that you send in tonight, they are going to promise to draft a running back in the subsequent drafts coming up to wind up the analytics crowd. So an extra incentive there to get your super chats in. I'm going to just generally talk about some of the topics as well. The 2022 class, what I think the Seahawks are going to do over the next few weeks, what I think of the 2023 quarterbacks, because that is going to be the big talking point for the next 11 months, what the Seahawks are going to do there. They are going to be one of a cluster of teams that are already looking ahead to that. You know, that's one of the reasons why the quarterbacks fell in this draft. You know, as people sort of wonder, why did Malik Willis last to round 3? Why did Desmond Ridder last to round 3? Why did Matt Corral last to round 3? Well, the reason is because a load of teams don't want to waste a pick in the first 2 rounds on a quarterback they kind of, okay, fine, fair enough with, when they can draft somebody else and then just push everything into next year. That is the main reason why those quarterbacks fell into the middle rounds, aside from the fact that they're not particularly good and that very few of them were ready to start immediately. Only really Kenny Pickett, and that's probably the reason why he went 20th and the rest of them lasted late into day 2. So get those super chats in. Don't forget to like the video as well. Get your questions in the live chat, and I will come to those. It is a Q&A. I'm not just going to do super chats, but if you want to support the channel, then please do get involved. Right, first things first, I want to give you some thoughts on what I think about the Seahawks draft class. And we've gone over this. You know, it's a few days removed now. A lot of you may have heard me speaking about this already, but I'm very, very positive about what the Seahawks did in this draft. And that is, with all considered, that I wasn't a huge fan of Charles Cross. I think some of the issues that I have with Charles Cross is obviously the system that he's been in. And yes, you can talk about, he's going to translate fine. He's going to do all of that. He's a great pass blocker. For me, I think the scheme, it does mask a lot of things. You know, basically just asks you to get in the way long enough for the quarterback to get the ball out. And he's pretty good at that. NFL's different, though. You've got to, in any given down, you've got to show, you've got to keep a defense honest. You've got to be prepared for what they're going to throw at you. It's going to be a little bit more intricate. He's got to be able to show that he can do that, the different stances, the different types of blocks. He's got to go and learn that. And he may well be able to do that. I'm not writing him off. I'm just saying that I think it's something that he's going to have to learn. And then the other thing is he's got quite a narrow base at times. Now, it's not all the time. You can find plenty of snaps where he hasn't got a narrow base. But if you go and watch games like the Ole Miss game, for example, you do see some of those issues. If I was Nick Bosa, I'd be bull rushing him and trying to get to the quarterback. That said, I have no issue with the pick. I will never have an issue with a team that says, do you know what? We fancy committing to the O-line in this draft. We fancy building in the trenches. And that's what the Seahawks did. They take Charles Cross to play left tackle. They take Abraham Lucas, who I graded it at the late first round, in the 3rd round, which is an incredibly valuable pick there. And, you know, you look at, I have no idea why Abraham Lucas lasted to round 3. I will not have any argument about why that is. Whatever issues he has, however raw you may feel he is, this is what he is. He's a 6'6", 315-pound offensive tackle who ran a 4.92, who ran a 4.40 short shuttle, and he's a 2.97 TEF tester, which means that he's explosive. There is very little in terms of his physical profile that you cannot talk very positively about. He is the kind of profile in a league that is desperate for offensive tackles. How the heck he lasted to round 3 is beyond me. And that's great value for the Seahawks. No doubt at all. They just ran straight to hand that card in as soon as they got into round 3. And now you've got Charles Cross on one side, and you've got Abraham Lucas on the other, and you've got bookend tackles. You know, part of me, a little part of me, as much as I like Boya Mafe in round 2, would have been even more impressed if they had the nuts to go and get Cam Jurgens to play center as well and say, okay, there's 3 building blocks for your offensive line for the next 5 to 10 years. But I really like Boya Mafe, so I'm not going to quibble about that. I think the Eagles got a good pick, though. It's for the Eagles have drafted 2 really good centers in back-to-back years. I'm interested to see how they're going to use those 2 players. Obviously, Dickerson can play guard as well. I think Cam Jurgens can too. But, you know, I think that would have been interesting, but I really like Boya Mafe. So really like the plan there. Boya Mafe is a really good player. We've talked about him. Made it look easy at the Senior Bowl. Did he win every rep? No. Did he win a lot of reps with speed, making it effortless? Yes. Can he win with his hands? Yes. Is he very good and powerful with his hands? Yeah. Does he just need to put everything together and he can be a really good pass rusher? Yes. Is it exciting to think of what he can do alongside Darrell Taylor and Uchenna Nwosu and hopefully a bit more Alton Robinson next year? Yes, it is. And I think that was a really good pick and a player that generally kind of felt was sort of late first, maybe early second. A lot of people have been mocking him. I certainly mocked him to Kansas City at 31. To get him at 40, tremendous value. Love the Kenneth Walker pick. I think people just spend too much time overthinking these things. He's a really good football player. They've got a really good football player at 41 who's going to help them win games. That's all I need to know about that. The more you get to know him, you get to sort of listen to what people say about him. If anyone's not watched it, go on the Michigan State YouTube channel and watch the sort of behind the scenes on him getting the call from the Seahawks. You will immediately take to this guy. He's got the kind of personality. I've seen people compare his personality to that a little bit of Tyler Lockett in that he's really likable. I think that is a fantastic pick. That was I celebrated the Maffei, the Walker, and the Lucas picks. I thought they were fantastic. It was a great day two, one of the most enjoyable day twos watching the Seahawks in a long, long time in terms of covering the draft. And then really happy with what they did, doubling down on cornerbacks, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, good value picks there, Tyreek Smith. I think it was Jeff who sent me a tweet saying, could be a bit of a Jacob Martin pick this, and I think he's spot on. That is I'm not saying that he's exactly like Jacob Martin or that they're even similar, but for me, you can put him into the same kind of rotation as Martin was initially in Seattle, and you can get some use out of him. I think he's the kind of player who will find a way to make himself useful even as a rookie. So I think if you get that in round 5, good value. And then I had Bo Melton in round 4 and Derek Young sort of a 6-7 as somebody who's just athletically, he's got a lot of talent there, a lot of potential, but he's very raw. Bo Melton, I think, is a really good receiver. And I think if they'd have taken him in round 4, I'd have been saying, yeah, fine with that. To get him in round 7, really, really good. And there's going to be some special teams value there as well. So I've said, look, people who know the blog and follow what I do know that I'm not just merrily going to chuck out a really high Seahawks draft grade because I happen to be wearing a Seahawks cap. I will always judge this how I see it. I think this was an A+ draft for the Seahawks. I don't see the need to give them just an A. I don't see why people are giving them Bs. I don't really see why anybody's giving them a C. I think that's ridiculous. If your basis for a draft grade is you didn't draft one of these bad quarterbacks, therefore I'm giving you a C because you needed a quarterback. No, it's not how it works. You draft good players. And we can spend all day talking about the value of certain players. You can make an argument for anything. You could run through how many receivers have busted in the early first round and make a case for never taking one of those, but then you miss out on a Jamar Chase. You could make a case for the number of first-round quarterbacks. It's an important position, but look at the league. It's full of people like Russell Wilson and Tom Brady who weren't, top picks. You can make a case for absolutely anything in terms of positional value. Did you draft good players? Did you draft players in the range they should have been drafted? When the pick was made, did it make sense? Little things like that accumulate for me to a really good draft class. And the most important thing is they went into this draft needing to build some foundations, to have something in place so that they could move forward and next year, go and ramp things up a little bit by getting the quarterback, by adding another really good player or two. And I think they've done that. And what will be in terms of the 2022 draft. It may not be a roaring success, but I just prepare yourself for that. Embrace that. I've already booked my hotel for Germany. I'm going to try and get over to that Munich game and watch the Seahawks probably lose to Tom Brady in the Bucs. Who cares? This is, to an extent, it's exciting just to see what's going to happen. There's a bit of mystery there, and it might be bad, but who cares? If it's bad, then high draft big, and we can talk about the 2023 quarterbacks in a little while. We've had a super chat here from Richard. He says, Richard Sherman said today that Kobe Bryant was one of his favorite Seahawks picks and a steal where you got him. Do you like Bryant and could he start? Yes, I do. I think that there are some, when you look at his size and his testing results, it was hard to put him any higher than the 4th round, which is where I had him on my horizontal board. So they took him in the right kind of place. But he's been tested a lot, because he's been playing across from Sauce Gardner and people would test him and he was up to the task. And when you watch him on tape, he can stick. I think the 10 interceptions is a little bit of a red herring because that's come across. He's been at Cincinnati for 5 years. He's played for 4 years. So, yes, it's not like he's got those 10 interceptions in a couple of seasons. It's spread over time. However, he definitely, to a certain extent, a bit like a poor man's Roger McCleary, is that he's always there to break up the pass. And he's not going to blow you away with his traits, but he has a knack of being in the right place at the right time. It's the kind of pick they'd have never made in a million years. Prior to their decision that they're going to go for short-run cornerbacks and go in a different direction. He's the opposite of a sort of a trait-based player He's what you would call a good cover corner who has got some grit, has got some seriousness about him, who can come in and help contribute. And I'm excited to see what he does. He may amount to nothing, but you throw him into the competition. Who'd bet against him starting this year? Who'd bet against him starting in year 2? There's a really good mix of corners in there, and they've not had that for a while. Imagine going into the offseason to, well, Akilla Witherspoon has to start because there's nobody else, and Trey Flowers has to start because there's nobody else, and there's Trey Brown as a rookie. And then the week before the season starts, whenever it was, you're trying to get, Sidney Jones in and people like that to try and add some numbers and some competition and trading away draft picks to do it, future draft picks. You don't have to do that anymore. You've got your Bryant. You've got Woolen in there, who's probably not going to be a person who contributes in year 1 apart from special teams, but you can develop him. You've got Jones back. You've got Brown in there. You've got Artie Burns. You've got a group of guys who are going to be going into camp, and like the 2 best men win. That's exciting. It's something that the Seahawks haven't had for a long time because they stopped drafting cornerbacks. So thank you for the super chat, Richard. There is another one that has come in, and I'm going to jump to these before I get to any other questions. If I don't get to your question and you really, really want to ask it, then just send it again, and I'll try and catch up with some of these because I realise I'm 11 minutes in and I haven't answered many yet, and I've been waffling on. Drew says, looking to 2023, do you think the Hawks have enough draft capital to get the quarterback they want? This is already like an anxious topic among Seahawks fans, I can tell. People have been writing about it on the blog. Lots of teams will need a quarterback next year that passed on one in this draft. And my concern is a team in the top 3 won't want to trade down. What I would say to that, Drew, is first and foremost, they may not need to trade down. They may be one of the teams in the top 3. The second thing I would say is look at the draft this year. Even in the top 5, there were 2 teams who didn't need a quarterback or would not have taken one, whoever was available, short of, I don't know, another Andrew Luck being available. Jacksonville were the first overall pick, having taken Trevor Lawrence, and the New York Jets were the number 4 overall pick. So there is still a chance that, Jacksonville, having had back-to-back first-round picks, they may be picking first overall again next year. And if they do, and they want to take a quarterback, I doubt it, because I don't think any of these guys will be rated higher than Trevor Lawrence. They might trade Trevor Lawrence, maybe have a shot at that. But if they don't, and they keep Trevor Lawrence, then that's one of the top 5. And look, Doug Peterson's a good coach. Is he going to be able to elevate a team like Jacksonville out of the doldrums, out of the real bottom 5 of the NFL? And if not, then they're going to be amongst the top 5 again. The Jets have had a really good draft. Are the Jets capable? Are the New York Football Jets capable of being anything more than what we've seen for the last few years? We'll find out this year. But their rookies might not have a big impact. Zach Wilson might not be good. And if not, they're going to be down there again. And then what happens? Do you give up on Zach Wilson in the same way that they give up on Sam Darnold? Or do they give him another year? There's a lot of sort of questions. You just don't know how it's going to play out. I mean, what if Russell Wilson's finger injury or it was an ACL injury or something like that, and Denver ends up picking in the top 5? Then you've got possibly 1 or 2 picks in the top 5. And they wouldn't take a quarterback if it was a team like that. If I think of a team, any team that's got a really established quarterback, let's say the Chiefs or somebody like that, they'd be desperate to trade down because they're not going to draft a quarterback. So they would be willing to trade down. So there's all kinds of scenarios here. And plus, the other thing you've got to remember is, I can already see 4 quarterbacks at this early stage who very realistically could go in the first round. And a lot changes. And people will always say this. They will say, what was being said a year ago? And they'll say, oh, Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell in the top 10. I never once felt that Spencer Rattler or Sam Howell were going to be top 10 picks. At no point last year did I say, these are the guys, they're going to be really high picks. They just didn't have it. And Spencer Rattler never elevated himself. In fact, he went the opposite way. And we'll talk a bit more about him in a bit, actually. I'll pause that thought for now. But when I look at these other quarterbacks, I don't see the same limitations. So there's a very good chance that, yes, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and 2 others, and I think potentially another 1 or 2 more could sneak into that first round talk. And if there are 4 or 5 first round quarterbacks, I would imagine that a Seahawks team led by Geno Smith or Drew Lock will be in contention for one of those. And the other thing is even if you are out of range, you have 4 first-round picks in the next few years and 4 second-round picks in the next 3 years in which to create some kind of trade chips. and you have some assets to move up if you want to and make a really attractive offer. The Giants don't have that. The Atlanta Falcons don't have that. I'm trying to think of the teams who need a quarterback right now. And I don't. When I look at the Giants, for example, and the Falcons, I think, are they any more likely to be worse than the Seahawks? Not really. So I think just let's not worry about that for now. Let's worry about that in December, and let's see what the Seahawks' record is, and let's see what the other team's record is, and let's see what happens to these quarterbacks in college football, and then worry about whether the Seahawks are going to be close enough to get these. They've got 2 bites of the cherry next year with 2 first-round picks. And the Russell Wilson-led Seahawks ended up with a 10th overall pick this year. So I wouldn't just assume that Denver are going to be Super Bowl contenders because he's back. He may get injured again. So we'll see how that goes. But thank you, Drew, for the super chat. Right, let's have a look at some of these questions. I'm going to go up sort of halfway along. And then if I've missed, like I say, if I've missed your question, chuck it in. I'm happy to stay on for about an hour. We'll see how it goes. Clayton says, and super chats get priority. Does Chris Carson even stay with the team based on the neck injuries and injuries in general? I think it's time to move on. I just don't know how. I don't know whether it's feasible or not, Clayton, because what are the rules with regards to a player who has got injured playing for you with a neck injury, cutting them? What kind of financial penalty is there? If you could make the saving of cutting Chris Carson, which is considerable, it is quite a lot of money. I've got the number here. If you just give me a second to dig it out. If you cut Chris Carson next month, it saves $4.6 million. So if you are, you've just drafted a running back in the second round, it would be worth having $4.6 million if you can get it. They may well just give him the chance until June to show that he's healthy. I mean, there's no real rush here. I don't think the Seahawks are going to be big players. I mean, if people are hoping they're going to go out and re-sign Jadeveon Clowney or, do something like that, or sign Julio Jones or Odell Beckham, that's probably not going to happen. So I don't think they need the money right now. They can probably wait this out. If you can pass a medical down the line, then they might be able to cut him and move on or come to some kind of an agreement with him. Or they might just keep him until camp. Who knows? I mean, if he wants to come back in camp, give it a try. I guess there's nothing wrong with that. You can still cut him during camp. Again, there's no real rush. You do not really need $4.6 million right now because you have got ample cap space when Carlos Dunlap's contract comes off the books in a month's time. So you can do kind of whatever you want to do on a small level, and you can just play this one by ear. But for me, it's time to move on. He's just been too injured too often. Good player, fun player at his best, but I do think it is time to move on. Jason says, Walker is a great pick next year. Are we saying there's no way there are backs like him available next year when it's more important? Well, see, I don't really understand sort of this second guessing of a pick like that. I mean, why would you say, we'll just get a running back next year? I mean, if you really like Kenneth Walker, why would you do that? This is the problem I think we've got into in the NFL, is that people have kind of decided which are the most important positions. And then if anybody strays away from that, I thought it was quite funny that Mike Sando replied to a tweet about when teams should draft a running back. And I replied to him, maybe an alarm goes off in every draft room when Twitter now says it's okay to draft a running back. I mean, I don't care. Look, just draft good players. That's what the draft's about. Just drafting good players who can help you win. Can Kenneth Walker help the Seahawks win football games? Yeah. He can probably help you win games this year. I mean, maybe you don't want to do that, but I don't care. He helps you win games of football. And the whole point of adding players is to add players who help you win games of football. And you can't do this ideally. Like, ideally, you draft a franchise quarterback with a 9th overall pick this year. Or ideally, you draft a franchise left tackle and a quarterback in round 2 or whatever. You can never sort of blueprint this out. Okay, and then in the first year, we'll draft this position. And in the second year, we'll draft this position. Because it doesn't work like that in the draft. You have position where you are in the draft. You're 9th as opposed to 1st. So that automatically dictates what you can and can't do. And it just follows on from there. They had 2 picks at the top of the second, and they took a really good player in Kenneth Walker. The people who they were saying they should have taken instead were people like the Clemson cornerback, who's not done any testing this year because he's been injured. And okay, it might satisfy you that you've drafted the right position that you think is worthy of that pick. What if he's not healthy? What if he's got red flags with injuries? What if he's a terrible tester and he just isn't good enough? We know what Kenneth Walker is. We know what he's going to be. I mean, for me, and people can say, oh, well, we all thought that. Listen, I thought Rashad Penny was a second or third round prospect. I liked Rashad Penny. I did not think he was a first round pick. I understood why they went with the running back. I understood their thought process when they took that running back in that year, but I would not have taken Rashad Penny there. I would have happily taken Rashad Penny, like I say, late second, third round. That's where I thought his value was. Based on the way he played it in the last season, they were justified in taking him. It's just that he's not been healthy. But I would have taken Nick Chubb, and there was a couple of other guys that I really liked at running back that year, who I also would have taken, who have not fared well. So I can't just say that I was all on Nick Chubb. There was two others that I really liked as well. But, Kenneth Walker, is legitimately, like I thought, with the way that he tested and the way that he performed, you could make an argument for late first without a shadow of a doubt. And if he comes in and he does to Seattle what Jonathan Taylor has done to Indianapolis, why would anybody complain about it? No one in Indianapolis is going, I wish they'd taken somebody else other than Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's a really fun football player who helps the Colts win games. Why wouldn't you want that? Just stop overthinking it. Just enjoy it. Just throw in some Kenneth Walker highlights videos. They're really good. Right, let's get into, and this is the other point that I want to make before I move on. Sean McVay drafted Cam Akers in the second round, and Andy Reid took Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now you might go, well, what a couple of wasted picks. But that's not really the point, is it? The point is that, two of the best offensive, most progressive offensive minds in the NFL are willing to draft running backs in that range. Doesn't that tell you something? To me, it's not a big issue. Okay, let's try and get to some more questions. Another super chat has come in, but I want to try and get a couple more first so I can get through some of these. Will says, can you get me tickets to the game in Germany, Rob? I wish I could, Will. I'm going to be trying to get my own entry. I can either get a press pass, hopefully, or a ticket, but fingers crossed I'll do that. But, good luck to everybody who wants to actually get a ticket for that game. And it's an impressive stadium. I've been to the Alliance Arena in Munich. It's a really, really good stadium. It's definitely well worth visiting. Nano says, thank you for all your great content and for being the only person in the media that looks at this from an organizational behavior perspective, vision, resource, alignment. I think that's the way you've got to look at it. There's no point. Otherwise, you've just got to be able to try and understand, work out what they're thinking. And when working out what they've been thinking over the last few years, aka the Jamal Adams trade, it's been easy to criticize. But working out what they were thinking this year makes perfect sense. They've created a foundation with their O-line, building in the trenches, which is what we wanted them to do, avoiding the bad quarterback draft, which is what we wanted them to do, and to build around their identity, which is Pete Carroll's vision for this team, which has involved them taking a running back and building through the trenches. I have no issue with that. I understand what they are trying to do. It is a tried and tested way of winning in the NFL. They are going to have to find a quarterback at some point over the next 2 years. Yeah, that's the next big challenge. And if they don't do that, they will not succeed to the level that they want to. But let's give them more than one draft to try and find that guy. This one from Daniel. If the Seahawks add Baker Mayfield and Akeem Hicks, can they get first place in the division? All our rivals lost major pieces. Hopkins, Chandler, Whitworth, 49ers are no problem. Not what I prefer, but not unrealistic. No, I don't know. I mean, the Rams are still the Super Bowl champions at the end of the day. And yes, they've lost Andrew Whitworth, but last time I checked, they still have Aaron Donald and Matt Stafford and Jalen Ramsey, and they've got some players in as well, haven't they? They've kind of replaced Beckham, and he could still go back. Yes, they've lost Von Miller, but I still think they're going to be really tough, and they always play the Seahawks really tough as well. So I would imagine that they're going to be in a really strong team. The Niners are just, as much as it kind of pains me to say it, they are just a team that sticks around. They are well coached, even though some of the Niners fans get very angry with Kyle Shanahan when they go on these slumps that they have. But they're a strong team. And I think if they keep Jimmy Garoppolo, they'll be stronger than if they go to Trey Lance. I'm not a big Trey Lance fan. But I'm interested to see what the Niners do with Jimmy Garoppolo, because if they keep Jimmy Garoppolo, they're going to have a huge drama surrounding them all year about their quarterback that they spent 3 first-round picks on. And if they just keep Jimmy Garoppolo on the bench, that's like $25 million for a backup. I think he wants out. They can hang on for a trade as much as they want, but who's going to take on a $25 million contract? Nobody, not at this point. So I don't see anybody trading for him because the options are gone. They're pretty much going to have to cut him at this point. And I think that's what he wants. I think it's what they want. And if he is cut, it'd be interesting to see where he goes. I'm not sure if he'd bolt straight for the division rival Seahawks, but there may be some other teams that he wants to go to instead. Maybe a Carolina, somebody like that. But maybe he would want to do what Bobby Wagner's done and what Richard Sherman has done and go and play for a rival. I don't know. And to be, as much as people laugh about Jimmy G, I would throw him into the mix. Whatever. Have a look. Bud says, how hyped are you about the Hawks coming to Germany? Are you going? I am intending to go. I've booked a hotel. I will not book a plane ticket until I know that I've got a press pass for a ticket. I am hyped. I've been to that stadium. I love that stadium. It's only like a 2-hour flight from here. So very much looking forward to it. I hope I can get over there. Win or lose. Bobby says, totally understand Walker wouldn't have lasted and like him as a player, but given where our team is, I think the argument is they could have gotten even more foundational talent there. I don't understand why running back's not a foundational talent. There was no player more foundational to the Seahawks in their Super Bowl run than Marshawn Lynch. And people seem to forget that. Marshawn Lynch was the Seahawks with Cam Chancellor. So let's not forget that. Jackson says, what quarterback class was worse, this one or the 2011 class? The 2011 class had more busts because there was more guys. I mean, I did not like Christian Ponder, did not want the Seahawks to draft Jake Locker. That was the Blaine Gabbert draft, wasn't it? I suppose because Cam Newton worked out, Andy Dalton worked out, and for a few years at least Colin Kaepernick worked out, then I would say that this one's probably worse. But, let's see how the other guys get on there. Could Bryant play in the slot? Yeah, I mean, he could do. I'd quite like to see Justin Coleman win that job just because we know he can do it. But, he could definitely compete for that job. Wilson says, Rob, do you get the sense that John Schneider is running the draft and personnel decisions now? This was the first time that Jody was in the war room during the draft. Yeah, COVID's probably also had a big reason for that. Jody not being in the war room or the draft room. So I don't read too much into that, and I don't. There's not really been anything other than the speculation before the draft before the meeting with Jody that John Schneider was going to take on a more hands-on role. So I don't know. I mean, is there anything that indicative of this being different? I mean, in 2011, their first two picks were James Carpenter and John Moffitt, two offensive linemen. So they've kind of done this before, drafted offensive linemen early. In the first few years, there was a lot of trenches building, and they drafted a running back. So they didn't draft a running back. They traded for a running back. They did draft a running back in Christian Michael very early. They drafted Robert Turbin, and they had Marshawn Lynch. So I don't think it's that different. My guess would probably be that maybe Pete has taken a slight backward step amid some of these changes, but it's never going to be advertised. It's never going to be Pete Carroll has got no say, or he's that information's never going to get out there. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he's just sort of going, okay, you do this, the bulk of the scouting in the team building, and I'll coach the team. And I do think there has to be some kind of a transition plan here. It can't just be Pete's going to coach forever and ever and ever. I mean, he is in his 70s, and maybe, having John sort of building the team, Pete coaching it until he's had enough. And look, the way that I've been very impressed with Clint Hurt, and Sean Desai has come in, and maybe he's a candidate. Maybe the Seahawks are looking for their next guy, to see if that's on the staff right now. We'll see. But I don't see anything imminent happening there. Paul says, always end up being 10 minutes behind on these. But here's my question. Who out of the 2023 quarterbacks could emerge and become a much more interesting prospect over the season, but isn't hyped currently? Okay, I'm going to come back to that, Paul. I saw there was a super chat from Charles. I'll come on to that first, and I'll talk about the 2023 quarterbacks. Rob, thanks for the coverage. Do you know any sites that rate drafts from years past, and how many years post-draft do you think is fair to judge? I don't know any sites that do that specifically, Charles. How many years post-draft do you think is fair to judge? I'd say probably 4, because then you know whether guys are going to get their second contracts or get their 5th-year option, and you can make a judgment on what is a bust and what's not. And you do have some late bloomers. Golden Tate was a late bloomer. We've seen sort of Frank Clark, had his best year in his final year in Seattle. Now, I don't think anybody would have called the Clark pick a bust before his sort of 2018 season, but certainly people would have said he's not, he's nothing that special. And then by the end of it, the Kansas City Chiefs were giving you a 1st and 2nd round pick for him. So, yeah, I think probably 4 years is probably fair. And then you go back and have a look at, who stayed with the team, who's signed for big money elsewhere, who's had their options taken up. I think probably 4 years is a fair one on that. Right, I've got a lot of questions coming. I'll try and rattle through some of these as quick as I can and then get on to that 2023 quarterback class as quickly as possible. Bobby says, what are your thoughts on the undrafted free agent class? Any standouts? Anyone they missed in the signing period you really wanted? I mean, there's a whole bunch of players that were still on my horizontal board very early, but when a player who I think is going to go like day 2 is an undrafted free agent, then there's obviously something there that I don't know about. An injury, character issue of some kind, crappy personality, whatever it is, the kind of thing that we'll never really truly discover. So there's nobody, I never tend to pine for the guys that I have highly rated to go undrafted, because either I've just got it completely wrong or there's something that I don't know about. And thoughts on the undrafted free agent class, people have been saying, oh, can you do a breakdown on the undrafted free agents? I never do it because those guys can get cut before the end of rookie minicamp. It just feels a little bit like, what's the point? You're almost better off watching the tape when they've got into camp and there's a bit of buzz about them making the roster. Then you can say, okay, it's worth spending a night or 2 nights watching one player to learn about him. Right now, I kind of think a lot of these guys I haven't studied properly, and I'm not going to rush out and do that now. I just hope that they can maybe hit on a couple of guys, because the good Seahawks teams, in the early years, they get Doug Baldwin or somebody like that who could come in and contribute as an undrafted free agent. So I think they need some of that moving forward. So apologies, I can't give you any more information on that. Robert says, do you feel linebacker position is still a question mark? Yeah, without a doubt. They've got some numbers there, but they haven't done anything. And look, there's definitely a possibility that Sean Desai is going to play 3 safeties a lot more like he did in Chicago. And, maybe it'll be Cody Barton and Jordan Brooks, and then a bit of Jordan Brooks with 3 safeties. And they'll be very creative with that. I think one of their big plans is to get Jamal Adams effective again in this system. And I think part of the reason why they've not done anything at linebacker is probably because we're going to see Jamal Adams not playing linebacker, but being a very aggressive, attack-minded safety. And they will use him in that role as someone like an attacking death backer on certain down and distances, but will still retain the benefit of having 2 safeties by playing Ryan Neal, who they really like, clearly, and Quandre Diggs. I think that's what they're probably going to do, and that's why they haven't done anything. But I would still imagine there is a chance. I mean, I'll just run through this now. They have about $11.5 million in cap space, effective cap space right now, but you can't use all of that. They can increase that by extending Poona Ford to lower his cap hit from 10 million, which is a team high. They can trade Gabe Jackson for a ham sandwich and save $6 million after June the 1st. They can cut Chris Carson after June the 1st and save $4.6 million. And they can cut Hugo Amadi now and save $2.5 million. So they've got the flexibility to do more. In terms of linebacker, Quan Alexander's out there. I don't know how expensive he would be, and he can't stay healthy, but he is a guy that the Seahawks reportedly were very interested in before he signed for San Francisco. He's only 27 still. He turns 28 this year. He had a recent visit with the Jets. Could he be somebody that they have a look at? Joe Schobert's still out there, but he's bounced around. I think it's like 4 teams in 4 years or something like that. KJ Wright was in the facility to welcome fellow Mississippi State alumni Charles Cross to Seattle, so he could be an option to come back for a year. I wouldn't be against that. So they've got some options there. I mean, other positions, Miles Addison signed with the Texans this week. He got in for a visit with Seattle to offer a bit more on the pass rush. Brady Henderson's talked about Carlos Dunlap being a potential re-sign down the line. I mean, he finished the season very well with 7 sacks in his last 4 games. Somebody mentioned Akeem Hicks earlier. He knows this defensive staff. I suspect that Akeem Hicks probably isn't going to play unless he gets a certain dollar amount. I think a few people are like that. I think Dwayne Brown's like that as well. They're just going to say, look, you may think I'm worth this. I think I'm worth more, so I'm just going to retire. I will not bother. Which is what Geno Atkins did. I think more and more players are going to do that when they get to that age and that time in their careers. And then the other one is quarterback, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit later on. But I do believe them when they talk about Drew Lock. I mean, I've watched a fair bit of Drew Lock actually over the last month, trying to get a feel for him. And look, he didn't play well for Denver, or well enough, but I don't think he's a completely lost cause either. I think certainly there are other players out there who are going to be playing quarterback next year who are worse than Drew Lock, or at least have a lower upside than Drew Lock. Few more. Mika says, Rob, have you peaked at the free agent class next year? What areas would they need to shore up before the draft? Bit early to say, Mika, but I think if you could get a really good center for the long term, you can never have too much pass rush. I think, having 3 really good receivers is always good. Basically just add talent. Who's out there? Go on add as much talent as you can, I would say. Jackson says, on a scale of 1 to 100, how excited would you be if we beat Denver and Russ had a bad game? I mean, I don't have any ill feeling towards Russell Wilson, to be honest. I would like Denver to give us a top 10 pick if they can, manufacture a terrible season again. But apart from that, I mean, I can't say I'd be any more excited if they beat Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. I'd be interested in the game. But yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm on a scale of 1 to 100. I guess I have to say, I honestly think it would probably be no different than any other game, really. And it's a weird one because you kind of, if you want the Seahawks to be in, if they're going for draft position by the time they play the Broncos, and we won't know for another month when they're going to play the Broncos. Let's say it was the third to last game of the season. If by that point you want draft position, you don't want to win. But if Denver's not doing too smart either, you don't want them to win either. So it could be quite a difficult one, that. The Seahawks should once be in the top 10 next year as well. The Broncos' first round pick next year, maybe in the later part of first round. Yeah, that's fairly obvious at this point. Trying to sift through the comments to see if I can find questions. We're just catching up. There's another super chat that's coming. I will get to that very, very shortly. John says, do you think John and Pete's plan involves a high draft pick next year? I think the answer to that question determines if they go get Baker. I think they'll just play it as it comes. I think that part of the problem, and we're seeing this in the NFL right now, is when you start saying you want to tank. And clearly it seems the Dolphins were intent on tanking, and then they won enough games to be like, what, the 5th overall pick or something like that? Or it may have even been higher and it was somebody else's pick that was 5th overall. I think it may have been. It may have been Houston. They had the 5th overall pick thanks to Houston, I think. And their pick was higher up. And it was all tank for Tua. And then Tua was there at number 5. And they should have taken Justin Herbert. But that's hindsight. So I don't think you can plan too much for this. I think you've just got to wait and see where you are. You can't spend imagine turning around to 90 guys in training camp and saying, right, guys, we want you to work your asses off for the next month. But when the season starts, can you just not do that? You can just give, 70% effort because we want to pick in the top 5 next year. It doesn't work like that. You've got to go out there and bust your ass to win every single game. And if you don't do that, let's just say that the Seahawks won a division in 2010 with a 7-9 record. And it was of no benefit whatsoever to Seattle to achieve that. But then we wouldn't have had Beastquake if it didn't happen. So, you kind of need to just go into this season trying for the best, trying to achieve. I don't think any part of John Schneider and Pete Carroll is thinking, yeah, do you know what? We want a top 5 pick. I think they say if they end up with one, so be it. But I don't think they're planning for that. And I don't think Baker Mayfield is going to be signed or not signed because of anything that Seattle does. I think it's purely going to be where he's at in his own head and where the Browns, when the Browns come to their senses and realize they've just got to get rid of this guy. which they seem unwilling to do. The Browns are a child having a tantrum. They refuse to allow Mayfield to move on because they want what they perceive to be value. And they're not going to get it because they're on the hook for 18 million and there's no teams for him to go to and no one's going to pay them 18 million. And if no one will pay him, then they're stuck with him. Now, if they want to have Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield in the same building together and all of the drama that comes with that, and a camera permanently fixed on Baker's face on the sideline whenever Deshaun Watson does anything wrong, then they can go with that. It'll cost them $18 million for that experience. I can't imagine why they would want to do that. But for the time being, they're just dragging this out. And it's time to just bite the bullet and release him. And if they do that, Seahawks can sign him for a veteran minimum and give him a go. And I think they would potentially be interested in that. No strings attached. But frankly, I'm just not that excited about, if the Seahawks sign Baker Mayfield, I don't think I'd be any more excited about that than I would be for Drew Lock, frankly. Let's keep going down here. This is a funny one. DK rumored to get traded to Cleveland. Is that with the no first-round picks they have left, Sonia? As they go to Deshaun Watson, what are they going to? Are they going to throw in Baker as a straight swap? Myles Garrett, he'd be okay. Swap for him. Okay. I'm trying to get through. There was another super chat. I'm going to have to shuffle along a little bit here and try and get to that next super chat. Sorry if I missed your question. Matthew says, what are the chances the Hawks will need to trade up next year and get a QB? We have been through this already, Matthew. They won't tank, but thinking back to missing out on Drew Bledsoe because of a meaningless win at the end of the season has me thinking. Thanks, Rob. But again, look, there's not you can spend the next 11 months worrying about this if you want to. I would suggest not to bother. I mean, I'm very relaxed about this. I'm going to run through the quarterback class in a second, so we've definitely covered that base. I just don't. There's no point worrying about it. And I think with this class, there's not going to be a Trevor Lawrence or an Andrew Luck that you miss out on and you go, oh, we missed out on that one guy. I think that there's a collection of interesting players who all have intriguing skill sets and different things that they need to work on. And I will run through some of those now. And I appreciate I've just seen 2 more super chats come in. So I will, I will go to those quickly and then I'll do this I've given this the big send up now, the 2023 quarterbacks. We'll come to that after this. TP1 Filler says, can you break down Lewis and Ellaby? Do you think either of them have a chance to make the 53? And if so, which one? Head on to the YouTube channel. There is on my channel, there is an interview with Caleb Ellaby. If you want to find out a little bit more about him, go and check that out. He's a very limited athlete. He is what he is in terms of an athlete. He's not going to be Russell Wilson, let's say. But he can throw it downfield. He can get the ball downfield. He had a lot of success throwing to Sky Moore and to D. Eskridge a year ago. So he's got the connection with D. Eskridge. They'll know all about Caleb Ellaby because they've been watching D. Eskridge. So, has he got a chance to come in to camp and compete? Yes, he has. Levi Lewis, I have watched him. I think he is interesting. He's left-handed. He's incredibly short. He's athletic. He's clearly, a winning quarterback who has elevated Louisiana. I think you have to give him a lot of credit for that. Do I see him ever being a pro prospect? I have to be honest and say no. Is he worth coming in as an undrafted free agent, as a camp candidate, someone to come in and see if he can maybe even nudge Jacob Eason out of the mix for, number 3 or whatever like that? I don't know. Yeah, worth having a look. So he gets a chance. Good on him. Good luck to him. I just don't see, I personally didn't see anything there that made me think, yeah, this guy's going to start in the NFL one day or even be a backup, to be fair. So I'm not going to pin too many hopes on him, but good luck to him. Look, absolutely good luck to him if he's going to do that. According to ESPN, Seahawks have gotten the most value in the draft since 2012. Why is the Seahawks draft reputation so bad? They have made some mistakes. That has been a problem. They have. We don't need to go over that again. They have made some mistakes. This one is, Rob, what are your favorite college football players that you've seen so far? Do you mean ever, or do you mean for 2023? Because if you mean for 2023, it's one of the quarterbacks I want to talk about in a moment. And if on a non-quarterback, it'd be Will Anderson, the defensive end at Alabama. But I'll run through some of the players that I'm interested to see next year in a little while. Okay, let's get to these super chats. The ZXKUQYB, don't know what that means, but it says the Seahawks had an awesome draft. Seattle is doing a 2011 with the quarterback, and the next draft they have 2 first and 2 second rounds to the QB. That's the spirit. That's exactly what it is. Spelled out perfectly well. Let's all chill out and just enjoy this draft and worry about draft position for Seattle next year another day. And this one says, if we had the number 1 pick next year, would you take Anderson or the best quarterback? Again, let's just worry about that down the line. Dan, appreciate it. Thank you for the super chat. I am not going to worry too much about that. I mean, look, Will Anderson had like 17.5 sacks and 30-odd tackles for a loss last year. The guy is a freak of nature. He's a generational pass rusher. And when you say generational pass rusher, people roll their eyes because they go, yeah, okay, like the last 10 generational pass rushers who did not end up being generational pass rushers. This guy is a generational pass rusher. And I've just set the Guinness World Record for saying the term generational pass rusher in a minute. Okay, right, let's get on to 2023 quarterbacks without further ado. I've spent a fair bit of time looking at the quarterbacks already because I wanted to just get on with it and get a feel for what they are. Let's start with Bryce Young. So Bryce Young at Alabama, he's getting talked about a lot. People think that he could easily be the first overall pick. What you need to know about Bryce Young is he's very, very small. He's listed by Alabama at 6'1", 194. I think that's a classic. You're being generous with the size there. It would not surprise me if he was 5'10", 190 pounds. Now, some people will just go, oh, well, whatever. Kyler Murray's short. It doesn't matter. And that's a line of thought. Kyler Murray is quite sturdy. He was like about 207, 205. Got quite a thick frame, like Russell Wilson. Young does not have that. He's very lean. He's not a strong player, not a strong athlete. He doesn't have a big lower body and he's just short. He is what he is, which is a very slight, slim quarterback. And you do sort of have to wonder how teams will view that. And when you're talking about the first overall pick, is a player with... I'm not saying that Bryce Young's not going to go in the first round. I think he probably will. But when you're talking about that size, is a team going to pull the trigger 1 overall or even 2 overall? That's just something to remember. Now, on tape, he is very good at processing. He knows where he needs to go and he executes. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think for someone who basically was starting out last year, to see sort of it's not the technical level in terms of his mechanics, but the technical level in terms of his processing. Okay, this is what the defense is showing here. He did this against Georgia as well. It's a really good defense. Here's what the defense is showing. I know that my number 1 reads there, number 2 reads there. I'll go progression. Number 2's on, throw it, get it out there, throws with accuracy, puts the ball in the right place. Perfect. He can drive the ball downfield and he can, quote unquote, make every throw. In the red zone, he will offer you some ability and can run with his legs. He can scramble. He had a touchdown against Georgia, which was sensational in the red zone in that he was being chased and harassed. Georgia really got after him and he found the tight end in the end zone just with a bit of improv and it was superb. When he is pressured, and he was pressured by Georgia, his mechanics do tend to fail a little bit with his footwork. And I'd be interested to see how he performs at the next level when he does face a lot of pressure. Because when you are in Alabama, you play a lot of games where you don't face that much pressure. You don't have that much stress as a quarterback. And when you go to the NFL draft, if you are picked very early, you're going to a team that's picking in the top 10 for a reason. So I think what I would say for Bryce Young is try and ignore the media hype. Try and ignore... He's not Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck, like you kind of feel like he is sometimes. The media is very good at this, building up the Spencer Rattlers and Sam Howells and some of these other players over the years saying they're going to be this. Tua Tagovailoa is another one of those. They're this, they're that. I just pump the brakes on that. For me right now, Bryce Young looks like a potential first-round pick. That's how I would describe him. Not a surefire, nailed on. He's definitely going to go first overall, second overall, because I just think there are other players in this quarterback class who are a little bit more intriguing. That's why I would say in terms of the size and some of the physical traits to go with the way that they play. Bryce Young, very good, accomplished player, but we'll the size is a thing. So, and that will get talked about more when the college football season starts. CJ Stroud is the other guy who gets mentioned an awful lot. So, again, I would be very wary of the media hype with CJ Stroud. I think he's a good player, and I think he has a lot of what you need to play quarterback in the NFL. Watch the Utah game in the Rose Bowl. There are touchdowns in that game that you or I could have thrown. Their receivers are so wide open. It's embarrassing. Basically, Utah could not get close to them. They had no answer. He was throwing to receive. He could have had a bajillion yards that day if he wanted to. I mean, it was tough to watch. And you have to have a think about what he's been throwing to at Ohio State. He's been throwing to the 10th overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft and the 11th pick in the 2022 NFL draft. And he had Jackson Smith-Njigba, who may be another top 10 pick in the 2023 NFL draft. And Ohio State have an embarrassment of riches at receiver. You know, the receivers generally want to go. And G. Scott Jr. went there from Washington. And basically, they get everybody. They have a reputation. Receivers want to go there. They get drafted very high. That's not going to change following what's happened to Olave and Garrett Wilson. So he has, and he have great tight ends, Jeremy Ruckert and people like that. So he's had an embarrassment of riches to throw to. A bit like Alabama, there's not that much pressure on Ohio State. It's a bit more competitive in the Big Ten for them, but not a million miles off. And the system at Ohio State has always been very generous to quarterbacks. It's always been mass production. Think about the last 5 or 6 Ohio State quarterbacks. They've all been mass production guys, and none of them have really done anything in the NFL. And Justin Fields, to me, had massive technical issues. I was not a big Justin Fields fan a year ago. And he gets to the NFL, and all those technical flaws just led to a million turnovers as a rookie. Maybe he'll fix that now. I'm doubtful, though. They appointed a defensive-minded head coach. So he could be another one who flops. And eventually you've just got to say, okay, the system is beneficial to the quarterback. He has the most loaded receiving crop in college football. That has to be taken into account. And then when you watch him play, he had some stinkers last year. The Oregon game was one of them. He had a bad interception, I think it was against Nebraska, where the guy basically fell over the receiver. He's looking right at this guy who's face planted on the turf. And you're thinking, don't throw, because your guy's got his face in the grass there. If you throw that, he ain't going to get up and pick and catch that. It's going to get picked off. And there's a split second there, and he's thrown it straight to the defensive back. And you see things like that, and you just, what are you seeing? And the decision-making is inconsistent. So, no, he's athletic. He's got a big arm. There are some really nice throws on top of the criticisms that I've raised there. But I'm just pushing back a little bit from the constant Young 1, Stroud 2, everything's amazing. They're going to be the best quarterbacks in sliced bread. I don't quite see it that way. And again, with Young, I would say potential first rounder for Young. And I would say potential first rounder for CJ Stroud. Now, anybody who has listened to me speak in the last month knows I'm a huge fan of Will Levis. Will Levis, for me, right now, if I had to make a prediction, will be the number 1 overall pick next year. Unless the team picking is Jacksonville when they'll take Will Anderson. That's just my feeling. Now, he may or may not have the kind of year that he needs to get up there. He wouldn't be the first player who either gets injured or regresses and then it doesn't happen. But you just have to watch him play. It's not. You don't need. Yes, he needs to bring his interceptions down. I just marvel watching him. The guy has got everything. He is incredibly mobile and can break off big runs. He is elusive. When he needs to get a yard. There's one of my favorite plays last season was when the center did a bad snap It's at his feet. He picks the ball up and just, oh, do you know what? We only need a yard, and just puts his head down, runs straight behind his offensive line, pushes the pile for 5 yards like he's Marshawn Lynch, and doesn't just get the 1 yard, he gets like 6-7 yards on this run. Incredible. As a thrower, impeccable arm strength, can make every throw, throws it all over the yard. His processing's good. He has got a bit of Josh Allen to him. Now, he is not going to be Josh Allen. Josh Allen had everything: the arm strength, the speed, the athleticism, the mobility, the massive hands. You know, he was like a machine. It's like he was like 6'5" and 250 pounds. I mean, as if you went into a factory and said, "Can you make me a quarterback, please?" Will Levis is not quite like that. He's more I think he's about 6'3", 6'4", 230 pounds. But he's going to run pretty well. He's a fantastic athlete. He's got a great arm. He is, unlike Bryce Young, who's playing for Alabama, and CJ Stroud is playing for Ohio State, he's playing for Kentucky. They were like, 11-3 last year, won the Citrus Bowl against Iowa, had a good game against Georgia. He's elevated Kentucky to a point where the other guys, then it's quite hard to elevate Alabama. What's elevating Alabama? Well, that's like an undefeated season, which would have been done. What's elevating Ohio State? Elevating Kentucky is something different. Now, he has lost a tackle. He has lost his Wan'Dale Robinson, his best receiver. He's lost his center. Joshua Pichel has gone as well. So the team might get worse. I think they did end up having like a top 10 recruiting class, though. And I just think everything about him is geared towards being a top pick. And as much as I want the Seahawks to draft him, I get the sense that the Seahawks have probably got an eye on him, because he does tick a lot of their boxes. I will not read any early mock draft for 2023 that does not have Will Levis in the top 10, by the way. That is a nonsense. If you see a list or a mock looking ahead that does not have Will Levis early, click off it. So for me, Will Levis I would say people are underestimating Will Levis, and I hope they continue to underestimate him. And I hope he's like there at pick 15 or whatever for the Seahawks, and they can take him there. But he would be a player that I'd be willing to trade up for based on what I've seen so far. And if he can lower the interceptions and increase the touchdowns this year, and if Kentucky continues to be brilliant, Will Levis. The other guy that I've been really intrigued by is Tyler Van Dyke at Miami. Now, I watched him. He was a player who came in when De'Aaron King got injured, and he took over a miserable Miami team that looked like crap. And he just took them to a 5-1 record. If you go and watch Miami play Pittsburgh, he outguns Kenny Pickett, who's just gone 20th overall. And he got better and better and better as the season went on. I thought he looked fantastic. He's got a great arm. The ball just like flicks off his throwing finger right at the end. It just propels it, just flicks it downfield effortlessly. He's huge size, very accurate, make all the throws. Again, like his processing. Looks the part. Not the best athlete, but not the worst athlete. I think he ran a 5.00 at Spark. He said that he is working on his mobility and his speed this camp to try and be a little bit more athletic and mobile. For me, it doesn't really matter. I don't think it matters as much as people think. If your guy can scramble away like Mahomes and extend plays like Wilson and and Allen and all of these guys, great. Can he throw an accurate pass? Can he keep your offense on time? They're still the main things, and he can do that. I think he looks fantastic. The concern I have is Mario Cristobal, and that Miami last year were throwing the ball downfield, and he looked really good doing it. Now, Mario Cristobal managed to make Justin Herbert a really difficult evaluation to the point where he's lasted to 6th overall instead of going 1st or 2nd overall, and nobody really knew what to think of him. People thought he was like, is he a first rounder? Is he a second rounder? That was happening before the draft. It's hard to remember now, but that's what was happening. And that offense has so much to say for that. Everything was underneath. Everything was a bubble screen. Everything was a short snap. Just get the ball out of his hands. Get the ball out of his hands. Get it into the playmaker's hands. It did nothing for Justin Herbert. And I fear that at Miami, they're going to do the same thing. And if Tyler Van Dyke is left to throw underneath every bloody throw and throw bubble screens, he's not going to be able to elevate his stock in the way that he can do by just getting the ball downfield. Now, they asked Tyler Van Dyke when Cristobal came in, what are you expecting? And he said, sorry, no, I misspoke. They asked Mario Cristobal about Tyler Van Dyke, and he said they'll tailor the offense to him. They'll get an offensive coordinator that works best with him. Tyler Van Dyke did an interview, I think, last week about the spring game that they had in Miami. And one of the first questions from the journalist was, so there was a lot of underneath stuff in that game. And it was like, oh, my word, it's happening again. It's happening again. So his stock may be hampered by the head coach. Miami might be good. Tyler Van Dyke might be good. We might not elevate his stock to the level it can be if he's stuck in a boring offense that doesn't really make the most of his skill set. So they're the four. I would say Tyler Van Dyke's got a good chance of going top 10. I would say that Will Levis has got a good chance of going top 10, maybe even first overall. Top 5, very realistic. Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, I would say right now, potential first rounders. I would expect both to go in the first round. Could they go first and second or top 5? Yeah, absolutely. That's distinctly possible. But if you read any mock draft right now, they have Young and Stroud at the top. I'm just saying, pump the brakes on that a little bit. It's not as guaranteed as some people think. What about some other quarterbacks? Tana Mckee, one to watch. He's done a mission. He's gone to Stanford, so he's a little bit older. Watched the Stanford-Oregon game last year. He was terrific. He was fantastic. Looked really, really good. Accurate passer, big, tall, good arm. Not the most mobile, but certainly not terrible in that regard. There's something there. Now, whether or not Stanford are just all over the place every year. If they could be consistent and winning and doing all of that, and if he could stay healthy, then maybe he could get himself into the first round conversation. But until that happens, you kind of have to see it before you can believe it. Dorian Thomason-Robinson, I think, is really good at UCLA. Now, he's gone back. He's gone for a super senior year. I think he's underrated. I think he's a good player. I think that if he has another really strong season, I'm not sure whether he could be a first rounder or not, but you see these guys elevate. Well, I'm just saying there's something there. And he may be a mid-round pick. He may be a high pick. I just think I like watching him. And I know that he makes mistakes, but I've also seen enough to think there's some talent there to want monitoring next year. Phil Jerkovic, I need to see more of. I've not watched enough of him. I want to see him have a full season at Boston College. And then there's Spencer Rattler, just a no for me. He has more to prove than anybody else in this college football season. He's a guy that has been pumped up and hyped. Last season, he kept throwing into double coverage, and you were just thinking, what on earth are you seeing there, man? What are you throwing to? It was awful. It was over and over again, every game for Oklahoma. Not surprised they hauled him out and put him on the bench. He's got to show he can go through reads and not make daft decisions and not just trust his arm and not just think, okay, I'm Spencer Rattler. I am going to throw this and I'm going to be okay because I'm Spencer Rattler. He needs to quarterback, not just trust his arm. So a no for me there. Certainly, though, I think there's a distinct possibility for 4 or 5 first rounders, and there's always players who emerge. And there's always players whose stocks falls. We will see who that fits into those categories. But that's really promising for a team that needs a quarterback to draft a quarterback next year. That at this early stage, there could be 4 or 5 guys who can go in the first round or are very interesting, if not in the first round. And with more potentially to come, I like the sound of that. The Hawks Nest has got in touch and said, let's smash that like button, folks. Keep up the great work, Rob. Thank you to the Hawks Nest. That is really appreciated. Thank you for that $5 super chat. If anybody has any more of those, please send them in. I'm trying to see if I've missed out on this one from Phyllis says, Rob, it's interesting you had Ellaby listed as a 4th round talent on your horizontal board, but you don't seem very impressed with him. In fairness, I had Sam Howell as a 4th rounder on my horizontal board, and I wasn't impressed with him at all. I mean, look, I like Ellaby to throw downfield, and he has had a lot of success throwing to people like Ellaby and Sky Moore, but he's a limited athlete. So, yeah, I don't tend to put quarterbacks who I think have got starting potential in the NFL, as low as round 4. I didn't think he was as bad as Bailey Zappi and some of these players, but I kind of put him on the same plateau as a very injured Carson Strong, who ended up getting undrafted, and Sam Howell went in the 5th round. So that was how I saw them personally. Let's have a look, see if there's any more questions here. We've done an hour and 5, So if anybody has any, I like this one. I'll put this one out there. Shout out to the Hawks Nest supporting other Seahawks content creators. Yeah, I appreciate that too. That does mean a lot. Thank you for that. Really like that. And we'll repay the favor when I get an opportunity. Okay. If anybody has any late super chats, I will wrap up very shortly. There's just a couple of things I want to talk about. Other players who I really like in the 2023 draft class, because the Seahawks have 2 picks, so 2 high picks. And if they do end up with a high pick of their own, whether it's Denver's or Seattle's, and then they get another high pick or one in the middle of the first round, then we get to talk about other players that are not quarterbacks as well. So Will Anderson, we've already talked about, fantastic player. Michael Meyer, the tight end at Notre Dame, is really good. A really good tight end, the kind of tight end that is worth talking about as a really high pick. So watch him. He's really good. I mean, let's see what's going to go in that direction. Hopefully not. Hopefully Noah Fant will, show enough promise to not have to talk about Meyer, but I just like Meyer. The idea of getting him is really exciting. Jackson Smith and Jigba, what a player. What a fantastic talent. He, for me, stood out more than Olave and Garrett Wilson at Ohio State. He was the one that, to me, shone the most. And whether he tests as well as they do, I have no idea. I didn't think Chris Olave had tested as well as he did. He is special. He is special. The thought of having a quarterback with your original pick that you really like, and then putting Smith and Jigba on a field with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, D. Eskridge, Noah Fant that is pretty exciting. Osiris Torrance is a guard who has gone from Louisiana to Florida. I like him based on my early impressions of watching him at Louisiana. He's gone with Billy Napier to Florida from Louisiana, transferred over. How's he going to get on the SEC? Very interesting to see. I don't like the transfer portal rules these days. I don't like what's happening to college football. But part of me likes that we can see Osiris Torrance just nip over to Florida and give it a go in the SEC. Interesting to see how he gets on. Jordan Addison, the wide receiver who has created a bit of a fuss this weekend because he's been trying to transfer to USC to play with Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley. And Pittsburgh, understandably, not happy about this because they've lost Kenny Pickett and now they're fearing that they're going to lose the Biletnikoff winner as well. Again, I'm not a fan of stuff like that. But those are the rules now. And if he did go to USC, it'd be interesting to see how he gets on. But he is a very dynamic, smaller receiver, diminutive, very good, very reliable, consistent, athletic. Nolan Smith, the defensive end at Georgia, big time in terms of athleticism, explosive, quick, somebody to watch as they sort of transition to a new group up front. Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle at Georgia, will be another one to watch, as will Keely Ringo, who had the interception right at the end of the national championship game. Miles Murphy's a defensive end who's a bit like Trevor Walker in terms of size, who can get after it off the edge. And the scouting source that I have been speaking to over the last few weeks has told me to keep an eye on Monty Montgomery, who is a linebacker at Louisville. He really likes him too. So there's a few guys to keep an eye on. People are saying there's a lot of people trolling in the live chat. Don't know why you would want to do that. But, if you've got that time to waste, then that's more power to you. I think we're going to wrap it up there. If anybody has got a last question or a super chat, I will happily read that out. I'll just finish with some thoughts on what happens next at quarterback. I do think that they're going to go into this with Drew Lock and Geno Smith and Jacob Eason and maybe one of the other guys in training camp. I'd be surprised if they go down the route of signing Nick Foles, given his lack of mobility. I'd forget about training for Gardner Minshew. There's no reason for Philly to just give him away. He's a really useful, cheap backup for them who showed he can win a game at a pinch. They're not sold completely on Hurts if they need someone to get them through the season, because look, there'll be jobs at stake there. If that goes bad in Philly and they need someone to turn to, they'll take it. They're not going to tank because, Howie Roseman and the coach will need to have something to show something if that happens. So they're not going to get rid of Gardner Minshew. And I don't think they were ever planning to get rid of Gardner Minshew. The Seahawks may have even inquired about Gardner Minshew and they just said no. With Baker Mayfield, again, we've kind of talked a little bit about that. That's going to be solely up to the Browns. If they can sort of grow up a little bit, then maybe, and just release him, or let the Seahawks have him for like a 7th rounder and pay his salary, then he could be an option. I don't think the Seahawks would be completely against it. But at the same time, I don't think they're going to be knocking the door down. And I'll say again, I don't want to see anything really of Geno Smith personally. I mean, I think we've seen enough from Geno Smith over the last 10 years to know what he is. I am a little bit intrigued by Drew Lock and intrigued to see what he can do in a different team, in a different environment, with different targets. And look, I know people think Denver's got a great bunch of weapons, and they've got some good ones. Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy was a high pick, and people like that. I don't think any of them are as good as DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And he's brought Noah Fant with him from Denver, and hopefully D. Eskridge can take a step forward and stuff like that. I wouldn't be against him looking at another receiver just to bring into camp who's maybe a bit more experienced, who can really go for that number 3 role. So yeah, I think we'll see what they can do. And just as a little note here, Curtis says, for what it's worth, Diana Rossini said this morning on a podcast that the Seahawks were never in on Baker. I don't know. I don't know if I'd necessarily believe never in, because they were connected more than enough to him. I think probably sort of being lukewarm is probably more of a better description. They weren't banging the door down. They weren't desperate to have him. If the opportunity arose and it was in their favor, they would give him a go. But I don't think. I just don't. I don't think they're going to be desperate for that. Megan's got in touch. How long do you think we'll stick with Lock at quarterback? 1 or 2 years max is what I think. I think it depends what happens this year. I mean, he's out of contract at the end of the season, so if he plays really well, then that's going to be awkward. I think you've got to draft somebody, though. I think next year you've got to be aiming to draft, unless he turns into something great this season. Then I think you've got to be looking at drafting someone next year, and then that just means that the countdown is on to that player eventually starting. Thank you for all of the nice comments as well. A few of those have come in. Philip has said, thanks, Rob. You've made the draft very interesting this year. Neon says, thank you for the engaging content and analysis, Rob. It feels like the linebacker group is a bit questionable with depth this year as the scheme is transitioning to a 3-4. I think that's a fair way of looking at it. 67 Plush says, I have a win-loss question a little bit above. If you have a little bit more time. If you want to, here we go, I found it. What's your win-loss sweet spot? Enough wins to show competitiveness, but few enough to get a quality pick. What's your thought there, Rob? And again, it's too early to say. The schedule's not the hardest for Seattle. It depends what happens at quarterback more than anything else will influence this. If Geno Smith's playing quarterback, I think there's a good chance Seattle will win 4 or 5 games. If Drew Lock's maybe the same, but maybe because he's got a little bit more upside, they could get closer to sort of 7 or 8. I don't know. I'm interested to know, though. And, I'm excited. I'm excited again. Another season of the status quo was not very interesting to me. Now, I'm quite interested to see if Kenneth Walker and Rashard Penny can create a really interesting running game. And that'd be exciting. 2011 had its frustrating moments, but it also had, you could see the turn happening. You could see by the end of the year what the Seahawks are trying to be. They got that tough defense by the end of the year. You could see what Marshawn Lynch was doing for everything. And teams didn't want to play Seattle. They were coming to Seattle and they were dreading it and they didn't enjoy it. And when the Niners beat them, I think it was like Christmas Eve or just after Christmas, right at the end of the season, you could see how much it meant to them to win that game because it was a war. It was like a playoff game, a little playoff primer for them. And I'd be happy to see the Seahawks in that position. For all the talk of tanking and being in a position for a quarterback, there's actually something to be said for being on the precipice of feeling like something big's happening. And because the Seahawks have got the 2 firsts, the 2 seconds, they've got the 1st and 2nd the following year, the 1st and 2nd the year after that, they can move up the board if they need to. So I'm very relaxed about it. If the Seahawks play better than expected this year, fine by me. I'll be roaring them on. I want to see them win in Germany against Tampa Bay. Listen, I'm going to try and get over to Seattle and watch a game over there. And I've already looked into it. Robbie and I have been looking into getting over to Florida for the Gators Kentucky game. It's going to watch a bit of Will Levis in live in person, and the quarterback at Florida is meant to be a prospect too. So, going to try and get over there for that. I want to see some success. I want to see the Seahawks win. So I'm not going to be there sort of rooting for losses and tanking for quarterbacks and stuff like that. But if they are a little bit out of range for the players that I've talked about, they've got the opportunity to move up. So I'm very relaxed about it. So I don't really have a win-loss prediction right now. Just going to enjoy the ride. Last one here from Charles says, Hawks Nest, great to see you on Rob's channel. Rob, what do you think of the stadium in Germany where the Seahawks will play this season? Mentioned it a little bit earlier. I put some pictures on my Twitter account when I was there, right before the lockdown in this country. It was right before COVID struck. It was practically like a couple of weeks before. They were talking about it, spreading across Europe just as we were getting back from Germany. Amazing stadium. On the outside, it's got these like bubbles. Like if you see a picture of the Alliance Arena, you'll sort of see it's kind of got the sort of spaceship look to it. When you're stood right next to that, it does look like someone just like blown up a load of balloons and attached it to a stadium. That's kind of what it looks like it's in a great big piece of bubble wrap or something. But it's architecturally, it's amazing. And when you pull up to the stadium, it's the only thing. It's like elevated above everything else, so you can see it for miles away. And you're standing outside. It's an incredible place. Inside's great, really closed in the atmosphere, a little bit like Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and then it closes everything in. Can't wait to go. I need a press pass or a ticket, but I've got my hotel booked, so I've got my trip planned. Just need to execute that attendance now to get in there. Very much looking forward to getting in. So I think that's about as far as we go, unless there's any sort of late questions coming in. I don't think there is. I'll just leave with this message because it's a positive one from Brando K. This is the first time in years I'm excited to watch the Seahawks. Me too, Brando K. Me too. That's how I feel. Right. Well, look, first of all, thank you to everybody for sort of watching this channel and for following the Rebuild podcast and for visiting Seahawks Draft Blog over the last few months. I want to particularly thank Curtis Allen, Char, on the blog for chipping in with his articles and the help that he's provided over the last 12 months. C-Mode as well. I did my graphics for Twitter. Really appreciate that. To Robbie, who does the podcast with us, to Adam Nathan, who jumps on the podcast, to Jeff Simmons, who's also done a lot of these over the last few weeks too. Really appreciate it all. So what we're going to be doing now, look, I'm going to be going on vacation later this month, where I will be taking a bit of a breather. However, I am going to watch the 2023 stuff. I'm going to keep watching the quarterbacks and some of the other players. And when I have something to write about, you better believe that I'm going to stick it on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. And, if there's opportunities to stream, I will take them. I've got interview requests out with a few people, so we're going to be keeping this thing ticking over. If I have thoughts, I'll share them on here as well as on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. So keep subscribed, keep liking the videos, keep sharing and spreading the word. We're going to keep this thing ticking over. This is a big 12 months for the Seahawks. It stops a little bit now because the draft's finished. It is a little bit of a lull time. However, we'll be back at it. I'm having to block a user as I'm finishing off this thing here because the usual spam has reached the very. It always happens right at the very end of the live chat. I think somebody basically just waits until I'm wrapping up and then they start posting the spam. But anyway, there we go. I've blocked that user. It always happens at the end. It's incredible. Someone has asked whether I'll do a schedule release video. May jump on a stream with Robbie to talk through that. And of course, if anything big happens, like if DK Metcalf signs a new contract, and I think that'll probably happen in the next month or two, I'll be straight on here to talk about it and to write about it. So we're not going anywhere. In the past, I've kind of just shut things down until, training camp. I'm not going to do that this year. It's a lot of work to do on this draft class. We're going to still be here, still be talking things through. I hope you will stick with us. Whatever the blog's busy and whatever the number of people watching this are what they've been tonight, and the live numbers have been really strong, I'm going to keep doing this stuff. So it's up to you guys to keep supporting it, keep it going, and we'll get on it. So thank you for all of your super chats. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you to all the patrons for SeahawksDraftBlog.com as well. It has been a pleasure. Love the draft. A+ draft from the Seahawks. Well done to them for that. Very much looking forward to the next step. We'll see what it is. Until next time, see you later, guys. Have a good week. Bye for now.